If you were to take a trip to the coldest parts of the Antarctic oceans, you'd quickly realize that the innocent squids you used to see in the tropics were now anything but innocent. Their beaks grow massive, their suckers become hooks, and they start to consume things that they really shouldn't be able to consume. It's as if the ocean intentionally banished these creatures to the Antarctic just to keep them as far away from everybody else as possible. But why do these squids seem to evolve into these freaks once they reach the polar oceans? And what advantages do they have by becoming this terrifying? Well, if you want to understand exactly how the Antarctic is deforming these squids, it's easiest by looking at the most terrifying one, the colossal squid.
And I need you to understand just how colossal this animal actually is.
People hear the name and immediately assume it's just another word for the giant squid. But for any veterans of my channel, you'd know they are a completely different species. Giant squids are found everywhere around the world and are incredibly long, but mostly because of two extremely long feeding tentacles that stretch out for dozens of feet. Without those tentacles, they're realistically around 20 feet, instead of the 40 most people say. Still giant, but well, not colossal per se. Colossal squids realistically have about the same mantle length as a giant squid, which is basically what we see as their real body. It's just that colossals are over 500 pounds heavier. And in the animal kingdom, which includes us humans too, weight is essentially everything. It's why boxers have weight classes. Heavyweights almost always dominate lighter ones. It's just simply not a fair fight.
Of course, in the wild, who cares if it's a fair fight?
Everything's just trying to eat each other. They are the largest invertebrates in the world. And it's honestly funny because the second largest invertebrate is just the giant squid. These Antarctic giants are so massive that they'll literally outweigh the second largest invertebrate in the world by over double their weight. But even so, the colossal squid isn't just like, oh, we took a giant squid and made it super chunky. Heavier doesn't always mean scarier. These Antarctic beasts are a completely different species for a very important reason. Most normal squids use basic suction cups lined with serrated teeth to grab onto their prey. Look at those. Yeah, that's pretty scary. But what's even worse are those swiveling, multi-pointed meat hooks that colossals have. These hooks are deeply embedded into the muscle of its arms, and they can rotate 360 degrees. If the colossal squid wraps its arms around a target, those hooks dig directly into the flesh. The more the prey thrashes around, the deeper the hooks swivel and bury themselves. This isn't the first time we've seen Antarctic squids have disturbing replacements for suckers. Other Antarctic squids, like the giant warty squid, have spike-like claws on their tentacles. This is another massive squid that can reach nearly 8 feet. But the main question that we have when we see this is, why don't they just have normal suckers like every other squid? If a normal squid tries to grab a fish in the tropics, the suction cup creates a tight vacuum seal right on the scales. Boom, dinner. But the Antarctic Ocean is violently cold. The animals that live here, like the massive Antarctic toothfish, have to survive water that actually drops below 0 degrees. And to do that, they cover themselves in incredibly thick layers of dense fat, heavy armored scales, and a thick coating of antifreeze mucus. Try sticking a suction cup to a massive block of slime-coated blubber. It just slides right off. When they strike, they physically puncture through the slime and the blubber, locking directly into the muscle underneath. The more the prey thrashes to get away, the deeper those hooks shrivel into the flesh. Since Antarctic waters are a bit less lively than tropical waters, each opportunity to get prey can't be lost. We do see hooks in a few squids outside the Antarctic waters, and it is mostly for the same reason. The more massive, slimy, or thrashing your prey is, the more the need for violent claws attached to your tentacles. It's always the environment that shapes the animal, never the other way around. This is the same reason why colossal squids are basically misclassified too. If you look at the colossal squids family tree, you'd actually find out that it belongs to the Crankcryidae family, and for those who don't speak marine biologist, that is the family of the glass squids. Normally, glass squids are exactly what they sound like. They are tiny, incredibly delicate, and almost entirely see-through. They use this transparency as a cloaking device to hide from predators in the open ocean. If you can't see them, you can't eat them. But the colossal squid, well, does this thing look like it's made of glass? It is a massive 1,000-pound blood-red tank of solid muscle. So why did it completely abandon the one thing its entire family is famous for? Well, it's a bit of a complex reason, and because of the nature of how rare these mega squids are, there's a few theories. The first is that in the pitch black freezing waters of the Antarctic, being transparent can be a liability. Down in the dark, a lot of the fish and shrimp that squids eat use bioluminescence. They literally glow in the dark. If a completely see-through glass squid eats a glowing fish, the fish doesn't just turn off when it gets swallowed. The squid's stomach will literally start glowing from the inside out. You go from being invisible glass to very visible light. In the absolute pitch black of the deep ocean, walking around with a glowing stomach can be like holding a glowing sign that says free meal here to everything within a 5-mile radius. But you might be thinking, if colossal squids are mostly eating those Antarctic toothfish instead of small bioluminescent creatures, this shouldn't be an issue then, right? As well, they're nearly apex predators. What do they need to be hiding from? Well, that leads to the second and more likely theory. Big gigantic monster squids can't be made of glass. Now, obviously normal glass squids aren't actually made of glass, but they are nearly transparent. This works for smaller animals, but the colossal squid's hunting strategy isn't anything like normal small squids. They're taking out gigantic beasts of fish. You need real muscle behind you. And so, once you gain all that muscle, you lose your transparency. There's simply too much muscle around them. This is also supported by our only footage of colossal squids ever. Take a look at this here. This is a baby colossal squid, and our only footage of one in its natural habitat. It's pretty transparent, which goes to show that yes, they are glass squids still, but once they actually grow up to gain all that muscle, they just can't be glass anymore. You gotta get beefy. As well, now instead of letting light pass through them, their thick red skin absorbs all the light from any bioluminescent prey, not just from what they eat, but from anything shining on them. It's more about being able to ambush than hiding. Their only real predator, sperm whales, use echolocation to find them anyways. They aren't really scouting the deep sea with their eyes to spot some glowy fish inside a colossal squid. Now, this all makes sense, but there's one major effect that I've left out, which is the main driving factor towards all this Antarctic weirdness.
Polar gigantism.
There is a massive biological phenomenon occurring in the Antarctic Ocean. To put it simply, water naturally holds dissolved oxygen, which is exactly how fish and squids manage to breathe through their gills. In warm, tropical waters, the amount of oxygen the water can physically hold is actually incredibly low. The heat makes the water molecules spread out, and the oxygen simply escapes. Every animal on Earth has a biological ceiling. Your body can only grow as large as your oxygen supply allows. If a squid in the surface of the Caribbean tried to grow to the size of a school bus, its heart would physically fail. It wouldn't be able to pull enough oxygen out of the warm water to keep its massive muscles functioning. It would suffocate entirely because of its own size. The freezing water of the Antarctic completely eliminates this problem. Cold water physically compresses, trapping massive amounts of dissolved oxygen inside of it. The Antarctic Ocean holds more oxygen than anywhere else on the planet. And because this water is absolutely loaded with oxygen, the biological ceiling is completely shattered. The squids down here have an essentially unlimited supply of the exact fuel they need to grow. Their bodies never receive the biological signal to stop expanding. They can pump oxygen through 1,000-pound bodies without struggling at all, allowing their tissues to stretch and their muscles to pack on ridiculous amounts of mass. The ocean itself is practically force-feeding them the resources to become giants. The limiter has been entirely removed from their DNA. Of course, this isn't just affecting the squids. This is affecting everything. The sea spiders, the starfish, and in this case, also importantly, the toothfish. Giant Antarctic toothfish means giant prey, which means to eat that prey, you're going to need to be a much bigger predator. It's another arms race, and it's likely that the toothfish got big first, with the colossals getting big a few million years after to balance them. Again though, this doesn't just mean the Antarctic is just a massive fest of violent giants running around eating each other. A larger body requires more food. The Antarctic, especially the depths of it, food is rare. You can go weeks or even months without a single usable piece of prey crossing your path. Everything in this region is slow, insanely slow. And so, evolution forced these squids to turn their own bodies into massive, fleshy energy vaults. When a colossal squid finally does manage to snag a fish with its rotating hooks, its massive body processes that meal incredibly slowly. The sheer volume of flesh acts as a biological insulation, holding onto every single calorie for as long as physically possible. These squids are not like crazy krakens that take down cruise ships for a living. They don't swim around half the time, or like 90% of the time. They barely even move. They just hover, letting their ultra-slow metabolism stretch a single meal across an unbelievable amount of time. Their terrifying size is actually just a desperate energy strategy to survive the most desolate environment on Earth. It's honestly such a common misconception in the marine science world that colossals and giants are similar, but really, the only similar thing is that they're just two massive squids. Well, I guess that's a pretty big similarity. But even with that, we continue to find differences in them that only happen because colossals live in the Antarctic. Because of the extreme tilt of the planet, the Antarctic Ocean experiences a terrifying phenomenon called the polar night. For 6 straight months out of the year, the sun simply does not rise. The entire ocean, from the freezing surface all the way down to the abyssal floor, goes completely pitch black. 6 straight months. In an environment where you literally cannot see your own tentacles in front of your face, finding a meal should be physically impossible. So evolution gave them laser eyes. Well, not actually, but they do produce light. Colossals and giant squids have the largest eyes out of any animal in the animal kingdom, with colossals' eyes usually being a tiny bit bigger. But there is a real difference, and it's that colossals actually have bioluminescence in them. Right on top of these gigantic eyeballs, they have massive light-producing organs called photophores. They sit perfectly still in the freezing void. When they sense a vibration from a passing fish, they don't just blindly lash out, they just wait. And then they flash their giant glowing eyes directly at the target. Keep in mind though, while their eyes are giant and they do glow, the glow itself is not actually that giant. It's pretty faint, especially relative to their size, but with those massive eyes, they can detect any reflection from the light they produce. Before their brains can even process what is lighting up the water, the squid tentacle attacks them and they're cooked. For the other few months out of the year where there is light, the Antarctic Ocean is actually kinda packed. During that summer window, there is an absolute explosion of life. Krill, fish, and other smaller animals flood the waters to feed on blooming plankton. Feed during the blooms, and then when the winter hits, you have to be prepared for whatever comes. And if you remember those 360-degree rotating meat hooks and how they're designed to take down giant Antarctic toothfish, they have a highly disturbing secondary purpose for those times of low food. They're also designed to rip into squid. Yes, other squid. Different species, same species, it's all squid, and it's all food. There's really zero hesitation. Cannibalism is just a standard, built-in feature of their biology. There is speculation that giant squids do participate in cannibalism too, but it's likely not as common. Food is at least a bit more abundant where they live, and while we don't actually know because of how little we actually know about these creatures, it's suspected that the colossals are much more likely to attack their own kind. Dire times call for dire methods, and the Antarctic Ocean is usually a pretty dire time. These massive, terrifying squids seem completely unstoppable, and while they are covered in hooks, they weigh 1,000 pounds, and somehow they're even scarier than any giant squid in the world. They aren't that tough. No, we don't accidentally ram into them with boats like we do with whales. Because 1, they're in the Antarctic, and 2, they're thousands of meters below the surface. But our damage can be more indirect. If the ocean water warms up by even a fraction of a degree, the entire biological system starts to collapse. Warmer water physically cannot hold as much dissolved oxygen. As the temperature creeps up, the oxygen levels in the deep ocean start to drop. Their 1,000-pound bodies, which took millions of years of perfectly stable conditions to evolve, instantly become a physical trap. What makes them near-apex predators suddenly becomes the exact reason why they'll be the first to die. We don't fully know what will happen if the Antarctic Ocean gets warmer, but the brutal reality of the Antarctic Ocean is that most intimidating, terrifying creatures on the entire planet are usually the most fragile. We still barely even know anything about these creatures. We have only explored a tiny fraction of the Antarctic depths, which is just a double combination of being insanely hard to explore. I'm personally in favour of trying as hard as we can to keep the massive Antarctic sea krakens. They definitely aren't causing any danger to humans, and they make for some really sick thumbnails. But anyways, thank you guys for watching, and if you want to see our video about a giant animal monster that already got wiped out, check it out here.